Inside the Egypt courtyards, life moves under the shadow of fear. Female slaves move swiftly, carrying out endless tasks, their every action watched by sharp eyes. One misstep could draw the lash, the jeer, or worse, a punishment designed to humiliate, to strip away not only their labor but their dignity. Water, vital for life, could be weaponized for punishment. Female slaves were forced into the Nile, temple pools, or other bodies of water in degrading positions, kneeling, crawling, or naked, while performing menial tasks. The cold or murky water added physical discomfort, while the public setting amplified shame. Every movement was watched, every gesture criticized or mocked. The combination of exposure, forced labor, and public observation created intense psychological strain. The slave's body became a spectacle, her actions were interpreted as signs of guilt, weakness, or failure. Wet, exhausted, and often mocked by overseers and peers, she was reminded repeatedly that obedience was demanded, and humiliation was the price for missteps. The water punishment also carried symbolic weight. The life-giving Nile became a stage for degradation, reminding slaves that even the natural world could be turned against them. Pain, exposure, and shame intertwined, leaving both physical and psychological marks that lasted long beyond the immediate act. Sometimes, punishment involved humiliation not just from overseers, but from peers of lower or equal status. Female slaves could be forced to submit in demeaning ways to other slaves, demonstrating hierarchy even among those already oppressed. Tasks might involve carrying, cleaning for, or obeying the commands of a fellow slave while being mocked by overseers. This form of punishment was particularly cruel because it disrupted the social bonds among slaves. Instead of solidarity, fear and shame were instilled, and the punished woman experienced degradation from someone who shared her social status. Every act reinforced subjugation, showing that humiliation could come from any quarter. Some punishments targeted not only labor and appearance but the very identity of a female slave. Dressed in animal skins, adorned with faux ears or tails, or made to act like animals, she was reduced to a creature, stripped of dignity and humanity. The intent was clear, to transform her into a figure of ridicule, a living symbol of failure and subservience. The humiliation was public. Overseers paraded her through streets or temple grounds, inviting onlookers to mock, laugh, or jeer. Each gesture, sound, or movement required by the punishment emphasized absurdity and inferiority. The transformation from human to beast made every interaction a test of endurance and psychological resilience. This punishment reinforced submission in a profound way. The slave's body became a symbol, a stage for mockery. Peers and officials understood the lesson: deviation from obedience or failure to perform labor correctly could result in complete degradation. The act of being compared to animals stripped away any vestige of social or personal dignity, leaving humiliation as a constant companion. Wooden masks or facial restraints were occasionally used to force humiliation. These contraptions would obscure the slave's face, distort facial expressions, or hold the jaw and head in uncomfortable positions. The psychological effect was profound. By obscuring identity or forcing contorted postures, overseers turned a human being into a grotesque object, stripping away dignity while allowing onlookers to mock or laugh. These devices often accompanied public punishments, amplifying the humiliation for both the individual and the spectators. In ancient Egypt, the act of forcing a female slave into public nudity was among the most humiliating punishments imaginable. It was not simply about removing clothing, it was about stripping away the very essence of dignity and identity. Female slaves were paraded through temple courtyards, palace corridors, or marketplaces, their bodies exposed to the eyes of everyone around them. Their vulnerability was exploited to reinforce social hierarchies. The observers, whether priests, officials, or free citizens, were reminded that these women were considered property, utterly beneath reproach or protection. The shame of nudity was compounded by the crowds. Whispers followed their every step, laughter sometimes ringing out from curious onlookers or sadistic overseers who took delight in their suffering. The slave's own peers might avert their eyes in fear of drawing attention to themselves, leaving her isolated in her humiliation. Every scar, mark, or imperfection on the skin became a point of scrutiny, an unintended record of her failures or misfortunes. This type of punishment was psychological as much as it was social. The victim felt powerless not only physically but emotionally. The exposure was deliberate. Overseers often timed the punishment to coincide with festivals or religious ceremonies, when crowds were largest, maximizing the shame. Clothing, which had previously offered even a minimal shield of identity, was stripped away, leaving the woman completely exposed to judgment and ridicule. Some were forced to wear no clothing at all, while others were left in tattered remnants that drew attention to their vulnerability. The environment amplified the punishment. The glaring sun would burn exposed skin, while the dirt of streets and courtyards clung to their bare bodies, heightening discomfort and embarrassment. Beyond the immediate humiliation, this punishment had lasting effects. The community's memory would carry the image, and the marks of shame, whether physical scratches, bruises, or the memory of exposure, would haunt her long after. Even returning to her daily labor, the stigma remained, affecting her treatment by overseers and peers alike. The spectacle served not only to punish but to educate, a warning to all female slaves about the consequences of defiance or failure. Public nudity as punishment was designed to dominate and control. It stripped women of privacy, autonomy, and self-worth in a single, brutal act. The fear of exposure governed behavior more effectively than constant surveillance or physical torment alone. Each parade through the streets was a reminder that in a society built on hierarchy, beauty, and social standing, female slaves had none of these protections. Their bodies became instruments of social messaging, demonstrating both obedience and the terrifying consequences of failing to conform. Labor could be punishment in itself, but the most degrading tasks were designed to attack both body and spirit. Female slaves were forced to scrub latrines, handle waste, tend to decaying refuse, or work in conditions that exposed them to dirt, disease, and ridicule. These tasks were not necessary labor, they were exercises in humiliation, performed in full view of others to maximize shame. The physical demands were exhausting. Heavy water buckets, unyielding grime, and the repetitive nature of the work left bodies sore, raw, and often bleeding from contact with rough surfaces or contaminated materials. Yet the real torment was psychological. Fellow slaves and overseers mocked them openly, laughing at every misstep, jeering when they faltered. Their hands, once capable of delicate tasks, were stained and chapped, a visible mark of degradation. This labor was carefully calculated. Overseers selected tasks that stripped away dignity, making the slave not only a worker but a spectacle of shame. The smell, the filth, and the social ridicule combined to create a punishment that could last hours, days, or even longer. The work erased any sense of autonomy, reminding the woman that she had no control over her own body or time. Forced degrading labor was a punishment designed to humiliate, exhaust, and psychologically dominate. Each act of cleaning waste or handling filth became an assertion of power by the overseers, a lesson to others, and a constant reminder of the harsh hierarchy that governed their lives. Through this relentless toil, the female slaves of ancient Egypt were reminded that their worth was defined solely by obedience, and their bodies existed not for themselves but for the pleasure and authority of others.